in previous years when the 49ers have made it to the NFC Championship game or made it to the Super Bowl and lost, they've had kind of good reasons that they could tell their players that allowed their players who were, although, rightfully very angry, frustrated, sad, hurt after these losses. Then they go into the off season, and as a player, you kind of rebuild yourself and you say, okay, you kind of convince yourself by the time the training camp starts, by the time regular season starts, you're back in the mentality, we can and we will win the Super Bowl this year. And I've kind of flushed that previous year, and those doubts aren't in me anymore. And I have this renewed belief in myself, in my coach, and in my teammates, this team as a whole. I believe we're going to make it here if we just, check off these boxes, win our division, get here, blah, 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 blah. Now, I think what's most concerning is that the 49ers, I feel like they didn't have a good excuse to sell themselves this year. I think they truly had the best team. They won
They
their
did.
division. They got the extra week of rest. When they were in the Super Bowl, they had plenty of opportunity to win it, and they were the better team than the Chiefs, which has been, their Achilles heel all these years. I don't know if I just turned this off on accident. Sorry, I hit something. Someone earlier asked if I have a different mic all the time. I don't. I think I'm Italian, so I talk with my hands. So if it sounds like I'm just kind of throwing it around. Um, I wanted to ask you, because I'm under the assumption, and I don't mean to be a hater, but I don't think the 49ers, even though I think they want to, I maybe I don't want to say I don't think, because I'm like kind of superstitious, but I think it's very unlikely that the 49ers win a Super Bowl this year, or that they even make it back to the Super Bowl this year.
Right.
Part of that is because, and like when we're thinking about the excuses that they gave themselves, they had amazing injury luck last year. They've had years where they've had really slow starts or lulls in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
They've had injuries, whatever. And as a team, they've been able to will themselves into kind of being like, we're going to overpower this. Like we're going to go on a winning streak and win 12 games in a row now. We're going to, yeah, we have this guy went down, but our backup's going to come back and we're all going to rally around him and we're going to play so good. And really, like, they've had this overwhelming belief in themselves, in the team, and in
Yeah.
Kyle. And that's been able to push them through the like inevitable low moments that happen in a season. And I'm kind of the assumption that if things start to go wrong this regular season, I wonder if the 49ers are going to have the wherewithal to kind of push through that as they have in previous years, or if we will see what has happened. We've seen this in lots of other teams that aren't the 49ers, where maybe when one crack happens, you start to see lots of cracks come out. And maybe that doubt that these key players that you heard, their hurt, their disappointment, their lack of maybe belief in their head coach, that they, obviously are going to work all offseason to shove down. I do wonder if certain things go wrong. Christian McCaffrey misses 4 games. They win, or they lose, to the Bears or some team that they're not supposed to lose to. I wonder if in previous seasons when they've been able to override that, if this season you'll see that doubt start to creep back in, and maybe more finger pointing, maybe more just disbelief, and you kind of see that crash and burn, for lack of a better way to
Yeah.
explain that. Do you think that that's a fair assumption
I
for me
think it
to have?
is. I think it is because you've climbed the mountain to go back up. You knew you had the best team and you still lost.
Yeah.
And then you look at, okay, well, why did we lose? You can look at the overtime. You can look at the muffed punt and then trying to pick it up. You can look at Dre Greenlaw getting hurt. I mean, there's all these things. Then not picking up 9 unblocked pass rushers from Kansas City on blitzes. There's a lot of things where the Niners weren't beat physically; they were beat schematically, and
Yeah.
that leads you to look back at your coach and say, "What's going on, Kyle?"
Looks like
You
he
know,
didn't know the
you
rules.
don't have as much buy-in as you had even entering the Super Bowl. That some doubt has creeped in. The other factor that I would say is the team that loses a Super Bowl, especially when you're coming back after you've already lost one and you build all the way back up. Mentally, it's exhausting to get back up all the way up the mountain, get there, have the best team, and lose. it's just completely deflating. And it's very hard to recover from that emotionally. Back when I covered the NBA once upon a time, Phil Jackson would talk about the necessity of mental stamina, not just
Yeah.
physical, but mental. And that if you didn't have the mental stamina to recover from losses or recover from losing, that sometimes it can just derail you.
Yeah.
And he
You
would
got
talk
it.
about that just in games that you would lose in an NBA finals, that you would need to recover your mental stamina so that you could match the emotional level of another team if you were playing on their home court.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of thinking, that kind of emotion plays into what the Niners face now, is that you have to believe in yourselves, your team, and your coach. And you've just gone through a Super Bowl where all of those things are brought into question. And it makes it a lot tougher to climb back up the mountain, because if anything does go wrong, you don't have the same level of will, the same level of resolve to get back up the mountain.
Exactly. So what would you put money on? Do you think the 49ers are going to get back to the playoffs? And then do you think that they're going to get back to the Super Bowl? This is obviously all hypothesizing, but
Playoffs, yeah. I think they'll make the playoffs, but back to the Super Bowl, I don't. I think that the injury luck that they had is difficult to repeat in the second year. That can be a real problem.
yeah,
They were very lucky that Brock was coming off of elbow surgery and played so well and played
great.
every game. That's really rare. That hasn't happened for a Kyle Shanahan quarterback in a long time.
Yeah,
And
the
you look at
quarterback
the
and the
injuries that
running
they
back,
had.
right?
Yeah. Plus, you look at the injuries of what they had when you came off of the 2019 Super Bowl. There's a lot of guys that went down. And so when you had similar circumstances, they didn't hold up. So I'm worried about that. Plus, I look at the schedule. The schedule's tough. They play Green Bay in Lambeau. They play Kansas City. They play Detroit. There's a
Do you know
lot of
when
good teams that they play that are going to be hard.
do you know when the schedule? Someone even commented about this earlier on when we were talking about BA holding out. Do you know when the schedule release comes out? It's in May, right?
I think so, yeah. We know who, we just don't know when.
Yeah. But I feel like that was a depressing note, so I want to change the
I'm
subject. That
sorry
was just
about that.
something that I started it. It was just something I was thinking about. I mean, yeah, I'm like I want to salvage that. It was just something that when I heard, I was like, yeah, I wonder. I think also seeing the Warriors kind of at the end of their dynasty, obviously the 49ers haven't accomplished anything close to what the Warriors have, but just when
Yeah.
you see these teams that maybe are at the end of their rope, I think in the fantasy of it, it's like this beautiful last send off hurrah year, but rarely is that actually how it works. Usually it kind of is
Yeah.
like sad at the end.
You don't
Even
get
with
the
Brady,
Hollywood
right? Like you're
ending.
like, you
Yeah.
win the Super Bowl, that's amazing. And then you come back for 1 year and you get killed in the first round of the playoffs. And you're like, oh, that was
Yeah.
down.
But you still have the Lombardi to fall back on. That's the key.
Yeah.
As
Exactly.
49er fans, if you go back far enough, if you're as ancient as
I'm
I
trying to
am,
make it less depressing, and you're like,
you
yeah,
can
don't forget
go.
they don't even have that though. Yeah, that
Yeah,
sucks for the
well,
Bills, it
it's
sucks for the
just
Warriors, but the Niners are really screwed.
yeah. Well, I don't think they're really
Right.
screwed. It's just that they're going to face another transition. That it took them 4 years for a reason to get back up. Now I think that the transition can be faster this time because they've got a quarterback that Kyle believes in, and if they
Mhm.
make the right investments in the draft, they can bounce back and have a good, solid team. The core is still there, but the core is aging, and they're going to need to pivot. If they pivot and they don't have Brandon Ayuk, I feel less confident about what's going to happen going forward, but we'll see.
I
But this
definitely
draft's going to
agree.
be very key. That they have to get
That is
guys
going
that
to be
can
so
contribute
important for
and
their
play
future.
right away. Yeah, yeah. They
I
need a
completely
tackle that
agree.
can start next year, if not this year. They need playmakers at wide receiver if they're
I mean,
going to move
after
on
this
from
year, they're
Debo.
going to have to start looking at Trent Williams' side too. That's why it's, in
Yeah,
my opinion,
yeah,
imperative that they get a guy because their, excuse me, right side of the line looks terrible. And then when you're looking at like they need to rebuild that, they also are like very soon going to have to look at their, excuse me, left side pickups. Um, I did have a friend point this out to me when I was, saying, oh, like I'm worried that before the playoffs, before the Super Bowl, you could see cracks in the system with the players starting to doubt Kyle Shanahan. And my friend said, even if they got to the Super Bowl, I wonder if Kyle himself would be, stuck in his head, and if that is noticeable to the players. You know, maybe they see that doubt and they pick up on that, or they see that anxiety and they pick up on that. You know, when we think about Kyle Shanahan being, you know, drunk half of Super Bowl week, not, you know, it just,
Yeah, that wasn't a
I
good
think
look.
these things show up. Definitely not,
Yeah.
especially in hindsight when you don't win.